The champagne had gone flat hours ago, but I kept the glass in my hand anyway, needing something to hold onto. The rooftop restaurant in Manhattan hummed with the kind of energy that made ordinary people feel special, all exposed brick and twinkling lights strung between potted trees. The kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I didn't belong here anymore. My sister Alina had insisted on this dinner, claiming I needed to get back out there after everything that happened. What she really meant was that she was tired of watching me cry into takeout containers in my cramped Brooklyn apartment. So here I was, squeezed into a dress that no longer fit properly, pretending to celebrate her promotion, while my body reminded me with every breath that everything had changed. 6 months pregnant, and I still hadn't told anyone except my doctor. The secret sat heavy in my stomach, right alongside the baby who'd been kicking up a storm all evening. I pressed my hand discreetly against my side, feeling the flutter of movement beneath the flowing fabric I'd chosen specifically to hide what I couldn't yet face. "You're not eating." Alina narrowed her eyes at my untouched salmon. "The fish is incredible. You love salmon." "Just not hungry." The smell was actually making me nauseated, but I couldn't explain that without explaining everything else. "Tell me more about the new position, corner office." Alina launched into a description of her new view of Central Park, and I let my attention drift to the crowd around us. Manhattan's elite, dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, performing wealth for each other like it was a competitive sport. That's when I saw him. Derek. My ex-fiancé stood near the bar with a woman I didn't recognize, her red dress clinging to a figure that made me instinctively cross my arms over my own changed body. He was laughing at something she'd said, his perfect teeth catching the light, his dark hair styled exactly the way I remembered running my fingers through it. 3 years together, 1 broken engagement, and apparently he'd moved on spectacularly. I should have looked away. Should have focused on Alina's story about office politics and pretended I hadn't seen him. Instead, I watched as his gaze swept the restaurant and landed directly on me. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something that looked almost like pleasure. He said something to the woman in red, then started walking toward our table with the confident stride I used to find attractive. Now it just made my stomach turn. "Isabel." He said my name like he was tasting it, stopping beside our table with his hands in his pockets. "I almost didn't recognize you." "Derek," I kept my voice neutral, "you look well." "I am well, very well actually." His eyes traveled over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "You, on the other hand." Alina stiffened beside me. "Excuse me." "I'm just being honest." Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Bella, sweetheart, what happened to you? You used to be so careful about your appearance." The words hit like a physical blow. I'd spent 3 years with this man, 3 years of subtle comments about what I ate, how I exercised, whether I really needed that second glass of wine. I'd thought I was free of it when I gave back his ring. "She looks fine," Alina snapped. "Better than fine, now if you'll excuse us." "Fine," Derek laughed, and several nearby tables glanced over. "Alina, come on, look at her. She's let herself go completely." He gestured at me like I was an exhibit. "I mean, I know the breakup was hard, but stress eating isn't the answer. You've gained, what, 30 pounds? 40. Heat flooded my face. My hands trembled around the champagne glass I still couldn't drink from. "It's okay." Derek's voice shifted to false concern, the same tone he used to use when he'd criticize me and then claim he was just trying to help. "I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I care about you. Someone needs to tell you the truth, right? That dress isn't doing you any favors either. The fabric is pulling around your—" "That's enough." The voice came from behind Derek, low and controlled, with an accent I couldn't immediately place. Italian, maybe. Something Mediterranean that turned the simple words into a command. Derek turned, and I watched his confident expression falter. The man standing there was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair and darker eyes that seemed to absorb the rooftop's ambient lighting rather than reflect it. He wore a black suit that fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body, and there was something in the way he held himself, utterly still and completely relaxed, that made Derek take an involuntary step backward. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Derek tried to recover his composure, but his voice had lost its edge. "No." The stranger's gaze moved to me, held for a moment with an intensity that made my breath catch, then returned to Derek. "But I know enough. You're leaving now." "Excuse me. I'm having a conversation with my ex-fiancé." "You're harassing a pregnant woman in public." The words were delivered calmly, but something dangerous flickered in those dark eyes. "That conversation is over." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity. Derek's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, then something ugly as he looked at me again. "Pregnant," he laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Is that what you're telling people? That's rich, Bella, really creative excuse for leave." I don't know what Derek saw in the stranger's face, but whatever it was made him take another step back. Then another. His date appeared at his elbow, tugging at his arm, whispering something urgent. "This isn't over," Derek said, but he was already retreating. "We need to talk about this, Isabel. If you're really pregnant, I have questions." "She doesn't owe you answers." The stranger hadn't raised his voice once, but somehow it carried more authority than Derek's entire tirade. "Go, now." They went. I watched them disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Beside me, Alina had gone very still, her hand gripping mine under the table. "Are you okay?" The stranger's voice pulled my attention back. He was looking at me with something that might have been concern, though his expression was difficult to read. "I'm fine." The words came out steadier than I felt. "Thank you, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He pulled out a chair from a nearby empty table and sat down across from me without asking permission. "That man, your ex-fiancé, does he bother you often?" "We haven't seen each other in months." I was still trying to process what had just happened. The engagement ended 8 months ago. This was just bad luck. The stranger nodded slowly, his dark eyes assessing me in a way that felt different from Derek's cruel examination. Clinical, almost, like he was cataloging details for future reference. "You're pregnant." It wasn't a question. "Yes." The admission felt strange, saying it out loud to someone who wasn't my doctor. "About 6 months." "And he's not the father." Again, not a question. The stranger seemed to deal in certainties rather than guesses. "No, the father is not in the picture." I didn't know why I was telling him this. Something about his steady presence made the words come easier. He made his position very clear when I told him. "Then he's a fool." The simple certainty in his voice made my throat tight. "Both of them." Alina cleared her throat, reminding me she was still there. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" The stranger's attention shifted to her, and I saw my sister straighten under his gaze the way people do when they sense they're being evaluated by someone who matters. "Dominic Valentini." He didn't offer his hand, just let the name settle into the air between us. Alina's sharp intake of breath told me the name meant something to her, even if I couldn't place it. "I own this restaurant," Dominic continued, his eyes returning to me. "Among other things, when my staff informed me there was a disturbance involving a guest, I came to handle it personally." "We appreciate that." Alina's voice had changed, become more careful. "Mr. Valentini, thank you for your intervention. My sister doesn't need any more stress right now." "No, she doesn't." Dominic stood, pulling a card from his jacket pocket. He placed it on the table in front of me. "Your meal tonight is complimentary, and if your ex-fiancé causes any more problems for any reason, use this number." I looked at the card. Heavy cream stock, embossed with just a name and 10 digits. No title, no company. Just Dominic Valentini and a phone number that felt like something I shouldn't accept. "Thank you." I picked up the card anyway, tucking it into my clutch. "But I'm sure it won't be necessary." "Perhaps not." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "But the offer stands, any time for any reason." He left as suddenly as he'd appeared, disappearing into the crowd with two men in dark suits falling into step behind him. I hadn't even noticed them waiting nearby. "Do you know who that was?" Alina's voice was barely above a whisper. "Isabel, do you have any idea what just happened?" "A nice man helped me with Derek, that's all." "A nice man?" Alina laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dominic Valentini is one of the most powerful men in New York. His family has been in the news for decades, and not for charity work. He owns half the high-end real estate in Manhattan and has connections too." She trailed off, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "Connections to what?" "Things you don't want to know about." Alina leaned closer. "Promise me you won't call that number. Promise me you'll throw that card away the second you get home." I should have promised. Should have agreed that getting involved with someone like Dominic Valentini was dangerous and stupid. Instead, I thought about the way he'd looked at me, not with pity or disgust, but with something closer to recognition. Like he saw past the weight I'd gained and the fear I carried to something else entirely. "I'll think about it," I said, and watched Alina's face fall. 2 weeks later, I stood in the reception area of a law office in Midtown, staring at an envelope that had just shattered my carefully constructed walls. Derek was suing for custody of my unborn baby. The letter was dense with legal terminology, but the message was clear. He claimed I'd hidden the pregnancy during our relationship, that the child was his, and that I'd committed fraud by not disclosing my condition when we ended our engagement. He wanted DNA testing. He wanted parental rights. He wanted to control my life in ways I'd thought I'd escaped. The words blurred as I read through them again. Derek knew the baby wasn't his. We'd been broken up for over a month before I'd made the mistake that resulted in this pregnancy. A one-night stand with a man whose name I barely remembered, who'd left no forwarding address when I tried to contact him with the news. But Derek didn't care about truth. He cared about winning. "Ms. Romano." I looked up to find the receptionist watching me with professional concern. "Your appointment was for 20 minutes ago. Do you need more time?" I shook my head, stuffing the envelope back into my purse. I'd come here for free legal consultation through a women's assistance program, hoping someone could tell me how to handle the child support issues that were already looming. Now I had bigger problems. The lawyer I'd been assigned was young, well-meaning, and clearly overwhelmed by what I showed her. She talked about responses and deadlines and the importance of establishing paternity, but what came through clearest was the cost. Fighting something like this could run tens of thousands of dollars. She said it apologetically, like it was somehow her fault that justice required money I didn't have. "With your current income and no assets, you'd qualify for additional assistance programs, but the wait lists are long and Derek had unlimited resources. His family came from old money, the kind that bought influence and made problems disappear." I walked out of that office feeling more alone than I had in months. My phone buzzed. Another text from Alina, checking in the way she'd been doing constantly since the restaurant incident. I typed a quick response, "Fine, just tired," and kept walking. The business card was still in my wallet. I told myself I was keeping it because throwing it away seemed wasteful, but that was a lie. I was keeping it because some part of me remembered the certainty in Dominic Valentini's voice when he'd called both Derek and the baby's father fools. At the subway entrance, I stopped, pulled out the card, turned it over in my hands. "Any time, for any reason," he'd said. Did that include a desperate pregnant woman being stalked by her ex-fiancé through the legal system? I found a quiet corner and called before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring. "Isabel," my name in his mouth, with that slight accent wrapping around the syllables. "I wondered if you'd call." "How did you know it was me?" "I make it my business to know things." A pause. "You don't sound well, what's wrong?" So I told him. Standing on a Manhattan sidewalk with crowds flowing around me, I explained about Derek's lawsuit, about the baby's actual father who'd abandoned me, about the legal fees I couldn't afford and the court date that was already scheduled. Dominic listened without interrupting. When I finished, The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. Where are you right now? Midtown. I just came from a legal consultation that didn't help much. There's a car service around the corner from you. Black SUV, license plate ending in 774. Get in. My driver will bring you to my office. That's not, I wasn't asking for. I know what you were asking for. His voice softened slightly. You were asking for help even if you didn't say the words, let me help. The SUV was exactly where he'd said it would be. The driver opened the door without a word, and I climbed in before I could second-guess myself. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from Dominic Valentini in an office that occupied the entire top floor of a building I'd walked past hundreds of times without realizing who owned it. Tell me again. He leaned forward across his desk, those dark eyes focused entirely on me. From the beginning, don't leave anything out. So I did. The whole ugly story. My relationship with Derek, the emotional abuse I'd only recognized after it ended. The breakup, the rebound that had resulted in a pregnancy I'd never planned. The father who'd signed away his rights the moment he learned what we'd created. When I finished, Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Your ex-fiancé has no legal standing, he said finally. The baby isn't his, and you can prove it. But you're right that fighting this will be expensive, and he clearly intends to drain your resources until you give up. So what do I do? You let me handle it. I started to protest, but he held up a hand. I have lawyers who specialize in making problems like this disappear. They'll respond to Derek's lawsuit with enough force to ensure he never tries something like this again. Dominic's expression was calm, matter of fact. In return, you'll work for me. Work for you doing what? I need a translator. He gestured at the stacks of papers covering his desk. My business involves international shipping, contracts in multiple languages. Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French. You speak all of them, according to what I've learned about you. I blinked. How do you know what languages I speak? I told you. I make it my business to know things. A slight smile crossed his face. You have a degree in linguistics from Columbia. You've done translation work for several publishing houses and legal firms. Your reputation is excellent, and you're currently between steady employment due to your pregnancy. The thoroughness of his knowledge should have been alarming. Instead, it felt almost comforting, like someone had finally seen the whole picture of who I was instead of just the parts that fit their narrative. Why would you do this? I asked. Why help someone you don't know? Dominic was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. My mother raised 5 children alone after my father died. His voice was different now, less controlled. I was 12. I watched her work 3 jobs and still not have enough. Watched people look down on her because she was struggling, as if struggling was a moral failing instead of a circumstance. He stood, moved to the window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. She never asked for help, was too proud, too certain she had to do everything herself. By the time I was old enough to help her, she'd worked herself into an early grave. He turned back to face me. I swore then that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would. Not because they asked, but because they shouldn't have to ask. The honesty in his voice made my throat tight. Your lawyers must cost a fortune. They cost what they cost. Dominic returned to his desk, pulled out a folder. The translation work is real. The contracts you'd be handling are legitimate business documents. What I'm offering is fair compensation for skilled work, plus the added benefit of legal protection. And what do you get out of it? A good translator. His dark eyes held mine. And perhaps the satisfaction of watching your ex-fiancé realize he's picked a fight he can't win. I should have asked more questions, should have been more suspicious of a powerful man offering help to a stranger. But I was exhausted and scared and running out of options. Okay, I said. When do I start? 3 months later, I developed a routine I never expected. Twice a week, I took the subway to Dominic's building, climbed to his top-floor office, and spent hours translating shipping contracts and business correspondence. The work was steady and interesting. The pay was more than fair, and Dominic's lawyers had reduced Derek's lawsuit to ashes within weeks of receiving it. The baby was due in 6 weeks. My stomach had grown to the point where hiding it was impossible, and I'd stopped trying. The maternity clothes I'd bought secondhand were comfortable and practical, nothing like the tight dresses Derek had always pressured me to wear. "You're here late." I looked up from my desk to find Dominic standing in the doorway, his suit jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and I'd lost track of time working through a particularly complicated Italian contract. "Just finishing this up." I saved my work and stretched, feeling the baby shift in response. "The Naples deal can wait until tomorrow." He crossed to my desk, glancing at my screen. "You've been here for 10 hours, Isabel. That's too long in your condition." My condition is pregnancy, not illness. But I let him help me stand, accepting the steady pressure of his hand at my elbow. "Though I won't argue with going home. Your daughter has been doing gymnastics all day." Dominic went very still. "Daughter." The word had slipped out. I'd found out the baby's sex at my last ultrasound, but hadn't told anyone yet, holding the knowledge close like a secret that was only mine. "I found out last week." I pressed my hand to where she was kicking. "A girl, I'm having a daughter." "A daughter." Dominic's voice was strange, soft in a way I'd rarely heard from him. That's wonderful, Isabel." We stood there for a moment, closer than we'd ever been during our professional arrangement. I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive, and feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Would you like to feel her kick?" The question surprised us both. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, then dropped to my stomach with an expression I couldn't read. "May I?" I took his hand, guided it to the spot where my daughter was currently staging her nightly protest against the confines of my body. She kicked hard enough that Dominic startled, then laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his normally controlled features. "She's strong." "She's stubborn." I watched his face as he felt another kick. "Like her mother, apparently." "That's not a bad thing." His hand lingered on my stomach, both of us aware that this had moved past the boundaries of employer and employee. "Stubborn women survive." When his driver took me home that night, I sat in the back of the black SUV and tried to convince myself that the warmth spreading through my chest was just gratitude. Just appreciation for everything he'd done for me. I failed entirely. The first contraction hit during a Tuesday morning meeting. I was reviewing a Portuguese shipping manifest with Dominic when my abdomen tightened hard enough to steal my breath. I pressed my hand to my stomach, counting seconds the way the birthing classes had taught me, and waited for it to pass. "Isabel," Dominic's sharp gaze caught the movement. "What's wrong?" "Probably nothing." But another contraction followed barely 10 minutes later, stronger than the first. "Actually, maybe something." 4 hours later, I was in a delivery room at Mount Sinai, gripping the hand of a man I'd met at a rooftop restaurant because my ex-fiancé couldn't stop being cruel. Dominic had refused to leave, had been the one to call my sister, to direct his driver to the hospital, to speak to the nurses and doctors with the same calm authority he brought to everything. When I'd told him he didn't have to stay, he'd simply said, "I'm not going anywhere," and that had been the end of the discussion. "You're doing incredible." His voice was steady despite my grip on his fingers. "The doctor says just a few more pushes." Easy for you to say, but I was grateful for his presence, for the anchor of his hand in mine. "You're not the one pushing a human out of your body." Fair point. The final push brought my daughter into the world at 7:43 in the evening, screaming, healthy, and absolutely perfect. The nurses cleaned her and wrapped her in a pink blanket, then placed her in my arms. "Hey there." I stared down at the tiny face, still red and squished from birth. "Hey, beautiful girl, I'm your mom." She stopped crying, her unfocused eyes blinking in my general direction like she was trying to figure out where that voice was coming from. "She's beautiful." Dominic's voice was rough, different than I'd ever heard it. "Absolutely beautiful." "Do you want to hold her?" He looked startled by the offer. "I don't want to intrude." You've been here for my entire labor. I think we're past intrusion. I shifted carefully, making room. Support her head. Watching Dominic Valentini hold my newborn daughter was something I'd never forget. This powerful man, rumored to be connected to things I'd learned not to ask about, cradling a 7-pound baby like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. What's her name? Sophia. The name had come to me during labor, certain and right. Sophia Grace Romano. Sophia, he said it with his Italian accent, turning it into music. Perfect. Elena arrived an hour later, tears streaming down her face as she met her niece for the first time. She raised an eyebrow at Dominic's continued presence, but didn't comment, just accepted the strange circumstances of her sister giving birth with a rumored crime boss as her support person. Later, after Elena had gone home, and Sophia was sleeping in the hospital bassinet, Dominic sat in the chair beside my bed, both of us exhausted but unwilling to let the day end. Thank you, my voice was hoarse from hours of labor, for everything. The lawyers, the job, being here today. I don't know how to repay any of it. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. I reached out and he took my hand. You saved me, Dominic. When Derek humiliated me in that restaurant, I was at my lowest point, ready to give up on everything, and you just appeared. You were being attacked. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I don't tolerate attacks on people who don't deserve them. Is that really why you helped me? The question hung in the air between us. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, staring at our joined hands. At first, yes, you were in a vulnerable situation, and I had the power to help. His dark eyes lifted to meet mine. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Watching you work, seeing how you refused to break no matter what your ex threw at you, learning who you really are underneath all the fear and exhaustion. Dominic, I fell in love with you, Isabel. The words came out calm, certain, like everything else he said. I didn't plan it, didn't want it to complicate things, but there it is. I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you've built a life for yourself and your daughter out of nothing. Tears pricked my eyes. I'm a mess. A single mother with no real career, living in a tiny apartment, with an ex who might cause problems again at any moment. I don't care about any of that. His free hand came up to cup my face. I care about you, about Sophia, about the family we could build together if you're willing to let me be part of it. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be here, for the late nights and the crying and the diapers, for Sophia's first steps and first words and first everything. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. I'm asking if you'll let me love you, both of you. I should have said it was too fast. Should have pointed out all the reasons why a relationship between us was complicated and potentially dangerous. Instead, I pulled him closer and kissed him for the first time. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing hard. Is that a yes? That's a yes. The next 4 months were a blur of sleepless nights, new mother exhaustion, and falling deeper in love than I'd thought possible. Dominic was true to his word. He appeared at my apartment at 3 a.m. when Sophia had been crying for hours, and I was near breaking. He learned to change diapers and prepare bottles, his expensive suits getting stained with spit-up that he never complained about. He moved us into a larger apartment in a safer building, then spent weekends building cribs and organizing nurseries with the same focus he brought to business deals. His family welcomed us with an enthusiasm that overwhelmed me at first. His mother, who he'd claimed died when he was young, but who I learned had actually moved back to Italy after getting remarried, flew in to meet her new granddaughter. His sisters appeared with gifts and advice, and the kind of loving interference that I'd never experienced growing up as an only child until my mother remarried. They're a lot, Dominic admitted one evening, watching his sister Maria argue with his other sister Lucia about whether Sophia needed more blankets or fewer. But they mean well. They're wonderful. I meant it. After years with Derek's cold, judgmental family, the Valentini warmth felt like coming home. The legal troubles with Derek had faded completely. Dominic's lawyers had not only defeated his custody claim, but had filed countersuits for harassment and defamation that made him back off entirely. The last I'd heard, he'd taken a job in another city, presumably to escape the professional embarrassment of having his frivolous lawsuit so publicly dismantled. I was translating in Dominic's office one afternoon, Sophia sleeping in a portable crib nearby, when he came in with an expression that made me immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," but he closed the door behind him, which was unusual. "I need to tell you something about my business that I should have explained before, but I was trying to protect you from it." My heart rate picked up. Elena's warnings from that first night echoed in my memory. "Okay." Dominic sat across from me, his hands clasped between his knees. "The shipping company is real. The contracts you translate are legitimate, but that's not all my family does." He met my eyes directly. "We have connections too, other operations, things that aren't strictly legal, import and export that doesn't appear on official manifests." "Are you telling me you're in the Mafia?" The word hung in the air. Dominic didn't flinch. "That's a simplified term for something more complicated. But yes, in essence. The Valentini family has been part of certain organizations for generations. I've worked to legitimize as much as possible, but some aspects remain." I should have been scared, should have grabbed Sophia and run. Instead, I thought about all the ways Dominic had protected us, the security that followed us everywhere, the way problems seemed to disappear before they could become real threats, the power he wielded so casually, always in service of keeping us safe. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I'm going to ask you to marry me." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "And before I do, you deserve to know exactly what you'd be agreeing to. The danger, the complications, the fact that our life together will never be simple." "You're proposing." "I'm warning you first." His dark eyes were serious. "Being my wife means being part of my world. Sophia would be raised knowing things most children never learn. There would be security protocols and threats to manage and moments where our safety would depend on decisions I make in rooms you'll never enter." He stood, moved to kneel in front of my chair. "But I will protect you both with everything I have. I will love you and honor you and build a life with you that includes all the good things, the family dinners and the lazy Sundays and the ordinary moments that make up a marriage. I will be Sophia's father in every way that matters, and I will never, ever make you feel less than the incredible woman you are." From his pocket, he produced a ring. Simple platinum band, single diamond, beautiful without being ostentatious. "Isabel Romano, would you marry me?" I looked at this man who had appeared in my life at my lowest moment and lifted me up without ever making me feel weak, who had chosen to love me and my daughter not despite our complications, but as part of them, who was offering me partnership instead of control, protection instead of possession. "Yes," the word came out strong and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into his arms and kissed me until Sophia woke up crying and demanded attention from both of us. The wedding was held 6 months later in a private garden in Connecticut, surrounded by family and a carefully selected group of friends. I wore a simple white dress that made me feel beautiful in a way Derek's critical eye never had allowed. Sophia, now nearly a year old, was carried down the aisle by Dominic's mother, gurgling happily at all the attention. Elena stood as my maid of honor, her earlier concerns about Dominic having faded over months of watching him love us well. "He's good for you," she'd admitted the night before. "I didn't think I'd ever say that about someone in his world, but he's good for you, both of you." The ceremony was brief and meaningful. We'd written our own vows, and I managed to get through mine without crying, barely. When Dominic promised to love, protect, and honor me and Sophia for the rest of his life, the certainty in his voice matched everything I'd come to know about him. Afterward, at the reception, I found a quiet moment on the terrace overlooking the garden. The October air was cool, and I wrapped my arms around myself, watching our guests celebrate below. "Mrs. Valentini." I turned to find my husband. My husband, standing behind me with 2 glasses of champagne. That's going to take some getting used to. I accepted my glass, being Mrs. Valentini. You have time. He joined me at the railing. The rest of our lives, in fact. Below, Sophia was being passed between Dominic's sisters, both of them making faces that had her giggling uncontrollably. She'd already started calling Dominic Papa, a word that had made him cry the first time she'd said it. Do you ever think about how different this could have been? I asked. If you hadn't been at that restaurant, if Derek hadn't decided to humiliate me that particular night. I think about it sometimes. Dominic's arm came around my waist. And then I stop, because thinking about what could have been doesn't change what is. What is? You're my wife. Sophia's my daughter. We have a family and a future and a life I never thought I'd have. He pressed a kiss to my temple. That's what is. We watched the celebration below in comfortable silence. Somewhere among those guests was the doctor who'd delivered Sophia, the lawyer who'd destroyed Derek's lawsuit, the family members who'd embraced us without question. All the pieces of the life we were building together. I want more children, I said suddenly. Eventually, not right away, but eventually. Dominic went still beside me. More children. Sophia should have siblings, brothers or sisters to grow up with, to fight with, to love. I turned to face him. Unless you don't want. I want everything with you. His voice was rough. As many children as you want. As much life as we can fit into whatever time we have. The reception continued late into the night, but we slipped away before midnight, leaving Sophia with Dominic's mother and escaping to the suite we'd booked for our wedding night. Later, lying tangled together in the darkness, I traced patterns on his chest and thought about the path that had brought me here. The broken engagement, the accidental pregnancy, the humiliation in that rooftop restaurant. All the worst moments of my life had somehow led to the best one. I love you, I whispered. I love you too. His arms tightened around me. Both of you, always. Epilogue, 2 years later. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept my hands wrapped around the cup anyway, watching Sophia chase her little brother across the backyard of our Connecticut home. Marco was 15 months old now, with his father's dark eyes and my stubborn streak. He toddled after his big sister with the determination of a child who refused to accept that his legs weren't quite long enough to keep up. They're going to exhaust themselves. Dominic appeared beside me on the patio, settling into the chair I'd saved for him. And then they'll fall asleep in the car and be up all night. Worth it, I leaned against his shoulder. Look at them. Sophia caught Marco, lifted him with a 3-year-old's careful concentration, and announced that she was going to teach him to catch butterflies. Marco clapped his hands and said something that might have been butterfly or might have been baby babble. I got a call today. Dominic's voice was casual, but I'd learned to hear the undercurrents. About Derek. I tensed slightly. What about him? He's engaged again. Some woman he met in Chicago. Dominic pressed a kiss to my hair. Apparently, he's been telling people that his ex-fiancée was crazy, and he's so glad he dodged that bullet. I should have felt something, anger, maybe, or vindication. Instead, I felt nothing. Derek was a name from another life, a person who had no power over the woman I'd become. Good for him. I meant it sincerely. I hope she's happy, and if she's not, I hope she gets out before he breaks her down completely. That's very generous. That's very moved on. I turned to face my husband. I don't think about him anymore, Dominic. Haven't in years. He's just irrelevant. Sophia's shriek of triumph drew our attention back to the yard. She'd caught something in her cupped hands and was showing it to Marco with big sister pride. We should think about getting a dog, Dominic said. Maria mentioned that her friend has puppies. You hate dogs. I love my children more than I hate dogs. He watched Sophia demonstrate the proper way to release a butterfly back into the wild. They should have a dog. Every child should. I laughed, the sound carrying across the yard and making both kids look toward us. Sophia waved enthusiastically. Marco copied her, his chubby hand flapping in our general direction. This was our life now. Chaotic and loud and so full of love that sometimes I couldn't breathe from the weight of it. The translation work continued, though now I ran a small team of contractors from a home office. Dominic's business had shifted further toward legitimacy, though the shadows remained at the edges, dealt with by people I'd learned not to ask about. His family had become my family. Elena was dating one of Dominic's business partners, something that would have horrified her younger self. My mother had finally stopped asking when I was going to find a normal job and accepted that her daughter's life wasn't going to follow any conventional path. I'm pregnant again. The words came out before I'd planned to say them. I'd only found out that morning, had been waiting for the right moment to share the news. Dominic turned to face me, his expression shifting from surprise to joy in the span of a heartbeat. Another baby. The doctor confirmed it this morning. I took his hand, placed it over my still flat stomach. About 8 weeks. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. Another baby. He repeated it like he was testing the words. Sophia and Marco and one more. Is that okay? I know we said we'd wait until Marco was older. It's perfect. He pulled me into his arms. You're perfect. This family is perfect. Sophia appeared at the edge of the patio, Marco in tow. Why is Papa hugging Mama? Is it a happy hug or a sad hug? Happy hug. Dominic released me enough to scoop both children up, one in each arm. The happiest hug. Can we have ice cream for dinner? Sophia pressed her advantage. No, I intervened, but you can help me make pizza. The afternoon dissolved into flower fights and tomato sauce disasters and the ordinary magic of a family being together. By bedtime, both kids were exhausted, passing out in their beds before we'd finished the second bedtime story. In our bedroom, Dominic pulled me close, his hand finding its way to my stomach the way it had during both previous pregnancies. 3 children, he still sounded amazed. I never imagined this life, never thought I'd have it. Neither did I covered his hand with mine. I thought my story was going to be about survival, about getting through, about protecting Sophia on my own, about never trusting anyone again after Derek. And now my story is about love. I kissed him softly. About finding it when I least expected to. About building something real with someone who sees me, all of me, and chooses to stay anyway. Always, the word was a promise. No matter what comes, always. Outside, the Connecticut night was quiet, stars visible in ways the city never allowed. Our children slept peacefully down the hall, and a third was growing inside me, adding another thread to the tapestry of our unexpected life. 3 years ago, I'd stood in a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan while my ex-fiancé called me fat and worthless. I'd been pregnant, broke, alone, and convinced my life was over. I'd been wrong. My life was just beginning.